We are committed, we are dedicated, and we're sounding okay.
I'm feeling raw, I'm feeling open, and I am feeling fulfilled. I'm ready to get in between her legs.
Well, you know I'm keeping that now.
Well, hello there, and welcome to On the Beat, the podcast that uncovers full frontal male nudity in cinema. My name is Laura. I'm here to bring you that chilled out, sexy vibe today with my co-host Ryan.
Are you really?
I'm super chill, feeling real sexy today.
Of course you are. Did you bring your wellies?
What?
Did you bring your wellies?
Why?
Because we're going to be knee deep in clunge.
Oh!
That's a fucking phrase a friend of mine used when we used to go to the Hive. If anyone's familiar with, Edinburgh in general, it used to be called the Honeycomb back when I was a youngster, but it was then called the Hive and also referred to as the Dive or the Skive. It was a fucking shithole, but it was like a teenage haunt. It was like a teenage club, basically. And that's where you went.
Club that had the carpeted floors, right?
No. That was the Cav. That was the Cavendish, yeah. That changed its name for fucking glory. But it was always referred to, even though it was a different name, it was always referred to as the Cav, or was referred to as the old and then the new Cav. So I think it was called Ignite when we were still living there. Like when I met you, it was called Ignite. But that had carpeted floors, which is very, very, very ill-advised. Certainly in a club situation where people have sticky drinks like their vodka and cokes and their gin and lemonades or whatever the fuck you have.
Well, speaking of a night, let's ignite this episode because we are talking about two films today, because why not just put them both together? We're talking about the 2011 comedy and the 2014 comedy, the INBETWEENERS movie and its subsequent sequel. And
yes, I think I would like to refer to it as the INBETWEENERS Saga.
Wow.
Because I also want to kind of bring up, obviously, its origins, which was the massively popular and still popular to this day TV show that aired on Channel 4, or more specifically, E4. Back in the day, which was the young alternative Channel 4
young
digital
alternative
satellite channel that they had.
Channel 4, where you can see scrotums aplenty.
Channel 4 was always the forerunner for the alternative, because that was where I first saw like boobies and stuff on TV.
Boobies?
Because they had a show on there called Eurotrash, which I don't know if anybody else is familiar with that. I remember seeing that show in the 90s. And they would cover all sorts of, funnily enough, trash in Europe, when obviously the UK was still in the cough cough EU.
What do you mean by that? They covered trash? They covered trash dumps?
So let's just say they
skips?
covered, let's say porn, sexy things, weird stuff. Yeah, like, I don't know if that's maybe where I saw a story about a man who loved a donkey, so he married the donkey. That might have been that sort of thing.
No.
Kind of like weird alternative-y sort of thing. It was all shot on a green screen, remember, and all the backgrounds were like painted weirdly, and it had a very distinctive theme song that I can remember.
You gonna sing it?
Nope. I would say go to YouTube, and I'm sure you could find it. But I think it was just like da 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 da. I think that's a very accurate rendition of it, actually.
That was beautiful.
I think that's better. Anyway,
let's take a little side trip off of memory lane real quick.
Okay,
Ryan,
sorry.
Let me tell you the synopsis, and I only wrote down the synopsis for the INBETWEENERS movie. I have the second one. It's just I don't want to speak for 12 minutes with these long synopses.
Well, I think at the end of the day, you're not going to see much distinction between what happens in that first movie, what happens in the second movie, and for the most part, what kind of really happens as a whole with the INBETWEENERS, just in general, I think.
This is the INBETWEENERS Lads Holiday, Part 1.
Fuck yeah. Fucking lads holiday. Lads go to Malia.
Wow. Okay. So the synopsis of this film from Letterboxd is: high school graduation just wouldn't be complete without an unchaperoned, uninhibited, and unforgettable final holiday. At least that's what Will, Jay, Simon, and Neil think when they book a 2-week stay on an exotic Greek island. As their dreams of sun-drenched days and booze-filled nights are left hopelessly unfulfilled, the lads fight their way into the party scene with hilariously humiliating results in this smash hit UK raunchy comedy.
Fucking hell.
I'm exhausted.
No stone left unturned.
And the sequel is Lad's Holiday in Australia.
Yeah. Aye. It's the second one is a weird one. It's kind of like the superfluous. I wouldn't want to call it like a tumor, but it's really a kind of unneeded. It's an unneeded sequel.
It's a cash grab, as sequels tend to be in a way.
Yeah. Well, that first movie was incredibly successful.
Oh yeah.
Huge hit in the UK. I don't know how well it did overseas, but I think certainly it was probably, and still is, isn't it, the biggest British film release of all time?
It set a record for the most successful opening weekend ever achieved by a comedy in the UK. It overtook Bridget Jones' Edge of Reason and The Hangover Part 2. And let's see, it earned £13 million that opening weekend. Okay. And the sequel made more money on the opening day than the original film, but it made less money overall.
Right, okay. Yeah, there's quite a distinct quality difference between the two movies, or depending on like how you look at it, they're probably kind of around about the same.
Exact same tone, exactly what you would expect. I mean, it hits all the beats you want it to. The sequel has some shit in it, literally, that made me laugh so hard.
Yes, there is some stuff in it where you know what you're getting when you walk into either an episode of The Inbetweeners or the movie equivalent of The Inbetweeners. You know exactly what you're getting, and for that, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. There's a familiarity with the comedy that you're expected there, and for the most part, it's kind of absurd. It's gross. But it's also kind of strangely relatable. Certainly, if you're someone who grew up in the UK and you grew up with friends very similar to this, as I feel like I did. But with obviously the double-edged is that with the familiarity also kind of breeds a little bit of contempt because it doesn't differentiate too far. It doesn't really feel like it's going anywhere.
Not breaking any new ground.
No, there's no new ground being broken, but with
I think that's okay with a sitcom, though. I think that's what you're expecting out of that. It's just comfort food.
Yeah, that's why Friends is so popular. Ugh. You know what I mean? It's like literally watching a wet sponge. But The Inbetweeners, I feel like it is regarded highly as one of the best British, or at least modern British sitcoms of all time. It existed in a bubble, in a period of time when it couldn't have been created or made or shown any time before or after its release. I feel like it exists perfectly in this one time frame, and that was between May 2008 and October 2010, and it was a 6-part 3-series show that basically depicted the lives of 4 young lads.
And those 4 young lads are Will, Jay, Neil, and Simon, played by Simon Bird, James Buckley, Blake Harrison, Joe Thomas, and you also get Greg Davies in there, who's incredibly funny. He plays
the head of sixth form at the school, and he is one of the greatest bastards to ever be depicted on the screen. I remember plenty of teachers who had this similar sort of attitude where they have just utter contempt for not only just you, but just any sort of interaction with you or anything that they have to do with it. They are basically tolerating you, even though they are definitely within the school system having to deal with kids on a daily basis. It's a very weird conundrum.
He's a hilarious guy.
He's very good.
He's incredibly tall.
Yeah.
And has a great face that is always a resting bitch face, filled with anger.
Yes. Blake Harrison, he plays Neil. He is the tallest of the group. I feel like because of Greg's involvement in the show, he really sells the fact that these guys are young kids.
Yeah.
They were like effectively like 15, 16, or I think they're 16 in the first series. So they're just coming out of, oh God, because it's the English school system. I grew up in Scotland, so it was like P1 to P6, which was S1 to S6. In the below the border in England, it's done in like years. So it's like year 11, year 13, year 14, year 15. So I'm not 100% sure what that is. Anyway,
what's the equivalent of that in the US? I thought maybe they were sophomores, juniors, and seniors.
Yeah, they were just about to go into their effective senior
high
year.
School.
Yes, in high school. So it's their the first season or the first series, they're going to go into, by the end of season 1, they're going to go into their I think their final semester. Before obviously going off to university or not. They will be leaving school soon after that.
Do you want to talk about? We've got a couple of directors to talk about, and it's
there's a myriad of creators here.
This little group.
So, like I said, it was a Channel 4 commissioned TV show, and it was created primarily by Damon Beesley and writing partner Iain Morris, and it's effectively based on what it was like for them growing up as teenagers in England. So for the most part, it's set in suburbia. So the show's set in suburbia outside of London, I think it is. It's like London suburbia. So it's very middle class. So as much as I think Iain Morris kind of saw himself as the Will character that's obviously played by Simon Bird. He saw himself as like the transfer who's going into this school to obviously these other, but really it's a middle class background they're all kind of dealing with here.
It's a story about friends.
Yes. I was trying not to make this too
school friends.
Yeah, I was trying to not make this too kind of quotey, because again, I think The Inbetweeners is one of the most quotable shows of all time. And certainly when Will comes in, he's referred to as a briefcase wanker. He's got a briefcase for whatever reason. His mum gave him a briefcase. He's obviously dealing with like his parents divorcing, all this sort of stuff. It really is. It's a hilarity ensues. If anything, we take comedy out of other people's trauma. But like I said, it ran for 3 series between 2008 2010. There was a US version that was developed for MTV, and Iain Morris and Damon Beesley had their hand in that. But really, that was an incredibly unpopular show, and it only ran for 1 season, and then they effectively cancelled it. And that only ran, it was released in 2010 in January, and it only went for 1 season. And it did not go very far.
From what I remember, that was filmed at least in part at Universal Studios in Florida, where I was working at Jaws at the time, because I remember them talking about them filming. And I feel like I always get it mixed up because they also did a US version of Skins around that same exact time. And I should have looked it up. Where did they film it? Maybe I'll look it up later. But it was one of those shows that they were filming while I was working at Jaws.
Yeah. I feel like there's a relatability to the UK version of The Inbetweeners. I feel like there's a lot to relate to. I feel like it nails being a teenager, having to grow up within the UK school system perfectly. And it is a fucking trauma. And I feel like it is really like it is an act of survival, trying to get through those formative years as a young person, trying to develop into an adult. And I think we'll kind of touch more on that as we get into it. But to be honest, I would say like the show is very much an absurd comedy. There's a lot of slang used in it. There's a lot of kind of sexual content, at least kind of spoken. And a lot of that comes from, I would say, he's maybe one of the greatest sitcom creations ever. But Jay is the character Jay.
I don't know what to say about Jay. Jay's disgusting.
I mean, the stuff that comes out of his mouth.
He's the funniest one.
He is he's like the stalwart comedian of the quadrant. You know what I mean? It's you've got your drama and your story that's kind of held up by Simon and Will, and obviously Neil, who's effectively there. He's a bit of an idiot. He's there obviously for that kind of, jovial kind of comedy relief, but then also it's kind of just hammered home that Jay, who's a compulsive liar, is banging and fingering his way through town as best he can. But really, yeah, he is one of the greatest creations. And I feel like he kind of only exists again within this tiny little bubble before, I guess, the advent of, or kind of prevalent advent of, political correctness that has really kind of dominated the comedy scene, at least over the last kind of decade and a bit. Mm-hmm. I kind of feel like he is the last kind of bastion of that kind of comedy, at least in British comedy, I feel like. And he just wouldn't exist now because of the level of chauvinism that he is portraying all the way throughout. Like I say, there is no procedure vaginally or anally that he has not performed, at least in his own depraved mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Every single one of these characters they're also teenagers, but they're perverts and they're predators and they're horrible people, but you still love them.
Yes. And like I say, there's, the humor comes from him, but there's also, it's incredibly knowingly offensive. There are just certain jokes in there that you just couldn't see being told now. And certainly I think it was an interview with Blake Harrison. He said there will never be another INBETWEENERS. It's just never going to happen. It just will not happen.
Well,
but why
do you need it? You already have this one.
Well, no, that's the thing. I think it's the continuation of the show. There's no way that they could continue the show or continue to maybe reunite them in any way, shape, or form. Is that, again, I kind of feel like it existed in this perfect little period of time where, I guess, TV channels, networks were looking for that sort of alternative thing. I mean, it's out of what the INBETWEENERS was. We also have Peep Show, and we also have Fleabag. We also get an alternative strain of comedy that's a little bit more raw. It is definitely offensive, but it is in some sort of way, it's incredibly relatable because it's looking back on it and a kind of a social kind of reflection of what real people would have. Certainly, I feel like if you look at American sitcoms, there's definitely a sense of optimism that is inbred into the sitcom formula of, say, an American sitcom. You see it in Seinfeld, you see it in Friends, you see it with Married with Children, all this sort of stuff, Golden Girls, everything, all these sorts of things. There's a level of optimism, and it's always kind of bright and sunny, and you don't really get that with the British sitcom. And I feel like that is kind of inherent to the framework of a British sitcom, is that it's just kind of it's a little bit dour, it's a little bit depressing, it's a little bit monotonous, and they have zero issue with just telling you that every single moment of how fucking depressing life can actually be with what they're doing and how they're doing it. And then obviously the absurdity and the comedy kind of shines through.
Well, that's just the difference between, your American comedy and British humor. Has always kind of been like that. Going back to Monty Python days, it's always a little bit absurd, and just the way that jokes are told.
Yes,
is very different than your American kind of. I don't even know what I was going to say, kind of slapsticky, jokey. But yeah, it's just a different type of humor. And
it's
it's not for everybody, and it's definitely. I've always liked that type of humor.
Yeah.
You know, like I kind of grew up with it weirdly. I think it's my older brother introduced me to a lot of kind of British film and comedy and stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that because it made me more interesting.
Yeah. I'd say like British comedy just in general is inherently darker than American comedy, I would say.
And it's also Australian comedy too is a little bit of an offshoot of British humor, which makes sense.
Yeah.
As well.
It's very kind of
dry and dark.
Yes. It's the it's the humor it's the level of humor and the quality of the TV that I grew up liking to the point where even like now I can't relate to say like a Seinfeld or something like that.
And that hurts me.
I just don't find it funny, but I've also kind of grown up on like the counter to that kind of show. But you talk about Australian humor, let's say, or New Zealand humor, like that kind of area. So basically, Damon Beesley and his writing partner Iain Morris, they'd originally started working on and writing episodes of Flight of the Conchords. Obviously, the Jermaine Clement, like the legendary show, Flight of the Conchords, and that was between 2007 and 2009. Now, also where Damon Beesley and obviously Iain Morris come into play as well in terms of the movies is they also direct the second movie. So they've gone from creating the show, writing all of the episodes of the show, to then writing the first movie, and then directing and writing the second movie that comes out. And the third partner in this whole process is Ben Palmer, who is the director of a few of the episodes between series 2 and series 3. He's also gone on to direct episodes of Breeders. I think it's that Martin Freeman show.
It was on FX in the States.
Got you. We'd seen some episodes of it. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
It's like unhinged Martin Freeman, which I think is fucking awesome.
Yes.
And also Joe Thomas has also gone to do other things with Iain Morris and stuff like that as well. They were in that movie that they'd made called Festival as well. But yes, Ben Palmer, he's a director. He's mostly worked in TV and he's also done movies. And I guess probably one of the more notable movies that he's done, that obviously Laura's going to like me saying now, is that Simon Pegg. I put in inverted comedy.
How dare you?
Man Up.
2015 Man Up starring Simon Pegg and Lake Bell.
No.
Baby. I love that movie. You know I love a rom-com.
Yeah.
I love an English rom-com. You know I love Simon Pegg, Lake Bell. That's my girl who directed several episodes of Pam and Tommy. Love her so much.
Yeah.
I love that film. Everyone should watch Man Up. It's so freaking good.
Yeah. I thought it was whatever it was. Anyway,
it's so funny. They have a dance off and everything about it is really good. Simon Pegg cries all the time. It's wonderful.
Anyway, back to the INBETWEENERS.
Rory Kinnear is in that film as well, and he plays a guy working in a bowling alley, and he tries to like sexually assault Lake Bell in the toilet, and then he like follows her home. Rory Kinnear, which we'll eventually talk about because he was in Men.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that episode. Yeah.
I love Rory Kinnear. Rory Kinnear is underrated as an actor, and he was in that Black Mirror episode where he fucked a pig. Rory Kinnear is awesome. I love Man Up.
Oh, God.
You hear me perk up, you talked about INBETWEENERS. I'm like, Man Up! Man Up does not have a penis in it, and that is a damn shame.
Yes, it's a real shame. Anyway.
You would have asked Rory Kinnear, and he probably would have done it.
Probably, yeah. There's a lot of folk out there where you're just kind of like, you have to question their sanity when at a drop of a hat, they'll just fucking drop their trow and show their members. That's what I've always realised. We're kind of going to take this a little bit differently. Again, we're dealing with a comedy series. We find doing episodes on comedies incredibly difficult.
Comedy movies, this is not a slight. I'm not saying anything against the INBETWEENERS at all, but they go into my head and out of my head quicker than a Fast and Furious sequel.
Oh, yeah.
And I love Fast and the Furious. Absolutely love every single one. But I walk out of the cinema and I don't remember what happened.
Yes.
And I feel like this happens to me with the INBETWEENERS movies. And I go, there's moments that I love that will stay in my heart that make me laugh. and then I just kind of forget the rest, you know? So it's going to be hard. Also, my memory sucks. So
they are incredibly forgettable. I feel like good comedies, just in general. I mean, you think about like Only Fools and Horses and Faulty Towers and stuff like that, is that they can be summed up with key little comedic moments that are always the things that you remember. And The Inbetweeners is definitely full of those moments. I mean, one of my favorite bits in the show is probably one of the most absurd things, but they've got all the lads are in Jay's dad's camper, and it just cuts in there, and like Jay's got his leg up on the table, and he's like pretending to finger someone here, and he's fingering another person there, and he's doing something with his mouth, and he's got someone on the table. This is all imaginary, by the way, and he's like humping, and it's just the three boys just like looking at this sight. It's like if anyone's seen the movie Old, it's not a good movie, that M. Night movie Old, there's a scene in that where the two kids go into the cave, spoiler alert, and there's a woman in there whose bones are actively breaking and reconstructing as it's happening, and that's the kind of ferocity and absurdity that I kind of liken it to. It's kind of wild.
I like that episode where they have the fashion show, and Simon goes out and he has to wear this little Speedo, and one ball sack is hanging out of the side of the Speedo, and he walks on stage and does a funny little dance.
Yes, that's kind of the only moment that would pertain to the podcast, is that we see a single nut.
Yeah.
In that fashion show. I do like that bit where he's so nervous, and like Neil's helping to dress him, and Neil at this point is just like, well, no, I'm not helping you with the tiny pants. But he completely and obliviously just does not realize that one of his nuts is hanging out, and I'm pretty sure that is his nut. I'm pretty sure that's Joe Thomas's ball, like hanging out of those tiny little pants.
I'm sure the budget did not call for the amount of money it would take to construct one nut.
They didn't have HBO money, let's put it that way.
No, HBO takes all the fake nuts.
Yeah, as someone who's worked in TV and tried to develop shows and stuff like that, like you're not given a lot of money. You really have to be a very good writer.
I'm gonna take that HBO drop that you just said and mention that in the sequel, in the Inbetweeners 2, when they it's the first one.
The first movie.
Oh, it's the first. Okay, I already forget what's going on.
That's why I'm leading the charge on this one.
Yeah, whoops. Yeah. Theo James is in the Inbetweeners movie, and he's Simon's kind of rival. This Carly's there, and who cares? Anyway, Theo James is there, and as everyone remembers, he's in White Lotus season 2.
Yes,
and he had HBO money, and they made him a gigantic fake penis for that film, for that show.
He also plays a bit of an asshole in that show as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty similar typecast.
Kind of, yeah. It's kind of like he's typecast. He's got that face.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's a lovely fella. But he's got a face where you're just like...
Punchable?
I went to school with folk who had a face like that.
Oh.
And I'm like, yeah, you just know. You just know that they're just shite.
Okay.
Just a fucking pack of shitters.
Yeah, Simon's love interest, Carly, is played by Emily Head, who is the daughter of Anthony Head. Anyone that loves Buffy should know who that is. And he plays Will's father in the movie. Anyway, there you go. Boom. Facts. Whatever. I'm literally just trying to write down, or I'm trying to mention anything I have written down, which isn't a lot.
Yeah, you're literally clutching at straws when it's coming to this episode thing here.
I'm barely here.
That's why we're talking about it as a saga, because we couldn't obviously sustain this level of humor.
We rewatched this 20 minutes ago. No fucking idea what's happening.
We watched it with the commentary. We got it with the commentary's just bedlam. Like, it's just the four main lads like talking about what happened on the movie and stuff like that, making horrible jokes to each other. Yeah. Effectively interacting as they are in the show.
Best friends.
But certainly to me it's so fucking relatable like the interactions that these lads have with each other. Because I was friends with someone who was a compulsive liar, and he lied about everything. Every single little thing. And it was so useless, the information that was coming out of his mouth. And the thing is, he lied so much that eventually when I got older, he was actually right about a couple of things. But he would never have known that they were true at the time. Like, I remember he said something about, like, a video game, and he's just like, well, I've seen that cartoon. And I was like, how have you seen that cartoon? He was like, no, I've seen that cartoon. And then I found out later, it was a cartoon, and it was only seen in Japan. There was no internet at this point either. So I was just like, right, okay, well, he just made this fantastic assumption, and it just happened to be right.
Wow.
I'm still friends with him, by the way. He's a good lad. But, like, I fucking could not stop fucking lying. Could not stop lying for the life of him.
Wonder what his life is like now.
I'm sure it's fine. But yeah, no, this I would not recommend against. Yeah, just don't lie. Kids tend to be. I mean, what we see in the show, obviously, and kind of what we continue is that being a child, being a kid in school, certainly in the UK, is fucking hellish.
Well, because you have to deal with all those youths.
All those fucking youths.
The English youths. The horrifying.
Yeah, they're awful. I remember dealing with kids when I was older. Not in the sense that, like, I had to, it wasn't like a part of a job. I didn't work in a school or anything like that. But just out in the general world, sometimes you would come across kids bold as brass, ready to call you a cunt and wanting to kick your head in. I remember once I was going off to work, and two kids who were smoking cigarettes, probably no older than like 13 years old or whatever, were sitting on my steps, and I was just like, excuse me. And then they started taking the piss out of me for like no reason. And one of them was like this tiny little shriveled, no offense to anybody with red hair, this little shriveled ginger.
Whoa, wow, you said that was such hate.
I mean, I was saying no offense to people who had red hair, but...
He goes, ginger.
This little shriveled ginger boy. Just sitting on my steps, smoking a cigarette. And obviously his boyfriend was this slightly larger, kind of bulbous potato, kind of hairy lad who had like a sovereign ring on and stuff like that. And it's just like, what the fuck are you going to do about it? And I was just like... When someone asks you that, it's like the obvious answers. I'm not going to do anything. Like, I can't do anything about this. Like,
in reality, young man, I'm going to walk away.
I'm finding myself in a situation as a 20-something-year-old where I'm just like, I'm going to work. I fucking hate my life, and the last thing I want to be doing is missing the bus because I'm arguing with a child.
I think the scariest thing for when I first visited England. From watching Peep Show and things like that, I was horrified of the youths. Anytime I'd see a group of youths, I would go the other way. I was scared.
It fucking happens more regularly than often.
Was going to call me a pedo.
Oh,
isn't that season 1, episode 1 of Peep Show, where he wants to like go out and he has to buy toilet paper and he can't leave.
Oh God!
Because there's all the youths outside.
It's like he can't wipe his arse because there's like kids outside on the estate. They'll just accost him.
There's that episode, and I don't remember what show it is, that Ricky Gervais show, where he's walking by a playground and some little kid calls him a pedo.
No, he goes past that school and the one of the kids, again, a little fat ginger boy.
Oh, God.
goes,
you guys, we
goes,
really love the gingers, genuinely. We have a lot of ginger friends that are dear to us. So
I'm also from Scotland, by the way. Like, I don't have this kind of level of contempt for people with red hair that certainly the rest of the world does. I'm from Scotland, so most of my friends and most of the folk that I know are red-headed because we're from fucking Scotland. That's the birthplace of people who are ginger. That's the reason why it's diversified all over the fucking world, is because they all came from Scotland.
Ginger lovers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't. Yeah, you trip over someone who's ginger back home. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, or strawberry blondes, whatever. For fuck's sake,
it's still ginger.
You're also fucking sensitive. But anyway, yeah, no, there's some fantastic bits in that show. But no, like, you get accosted by children all the time back in the UK.
Kids are so scary.
Kids are pretty scary, and when I was growing up, kids were also pretty scary. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just something that doesn't really translate too much kind of over here.
No.
It's like that sense of that. Because I feel like maybe children here, I'm not saying all children, they do respect their elders maybe a little bit more over here than they do back in the UK, where it's just kind of like...
Well, most of the children in the United States are too scared of getting murdered at school, so they don't have time to be mean to other people. They're too worried about losing their lives.
That is certainly something that comes up in a conversation more often than not, is just like, if you find yourself in a situation that's like antagonizing over here, the best course of action is kind of just to ignore it and to just defend yourself, either be it in your car or within a situation where you're kind of just removing yourself from the situation, because the possibility of somebody having a gun is actually incredibly high.
It's not really.
I mean, I'd rather not toss a coin as to whether or not, if I get myself into a fight with somebody, are they going to punch me or are they going to shoot me?
Yeah. I mean, you're probably not going to get shot. But
no, but there was, there's similar issues like back home. I remember, like, I mean, a lot of the times folk carry knives back home, which I think is a slightly more personal way of dealing out punishment in some way or another.
So you can get close enough to give him a kiss?
I remember I got chased by a fucking grown man when I was out skateboarding once, and he kicked me in the leg. He mistook me, and I put that in inverted commas, he mistook me for someone who was trying to shag his girlfriend, and he wanted me to come down the lane so that we could have a wee chat about it. And I was maybe only 12, and this guy was definitely his 20s. And I had a skateboard, and it was big and heavy, and I went to swing at him with it, and I ran away, but he kicked me in the leg.
Amazing.
And then he walked away, and I think he called me like a fucking whatever. And I was going to Margie. I was just going to the shop. To go get myself, like a sweetie or something. And then... a
little 12-year-old boy.
I had to fucking run home, eh? It was
12-year-old. Did you fuck my girlfriend?
Oh, it was fucking horrible. Yeah, no, and I'm like, I don't know your girlfriend. Like, I don't really know what I was supposed to do. It was wild.
I want to run through these full frontal scenes because there's actually several.
There's a ton. I don't think, we don't really want to kind of focus on the story or kind of individual moments. I feel like a lot of them kind of live and die within the film just as they are. But since there is quite a lot of full frontal stuff in the movies just as a whole, I think we're just going to cover those. There's
so many scrotums. There's so many wieners. Not as prevalent as we're making it seem, but there are some definite very funny moments. So
it's not dick a minute, basically.
No.
And at least there's certain things that the films share in that they both have like a shit joke in them. And certainly they do have a prevalence of male genitalia as a laughing point as well. So
so in the In-Betweeners movie, so we'll start with the first one at about 44 minutes. So we have a scene where all the boys are at the pool and Jay gets into an altercation with a young boy at the pool, right?
Yeah, let's just say, they're in Malia, which to the top of my head, I am not 100% sure where that is. Is it Mali or Malaga? Either way, I can't really remember. It's basically
they're in Greece. They're meant to be on Crete, right? They flew into Crete.
Oh, right, yeah.
But they only filmed there for maybe a week, and then they filmed the rest of it in Majorca.
It did look, because I've been to Majorca. Aye, what's the fucking Brit? Is the Brit holiday standards? I want my lager, my sandwich, a packet of crisps. I'm a fucking geezer. I like my clubbing. Fucking Brexit. All this sort of shit. And it honestly, it captures it fucking perfectly. The amount of tribal tattoos and like topless fucking into the fucking zoot suits. Fucking loved that fucking sequence.
Wow.
Loved it.
Well, so this, did I already say when it came in? About 44 minutes into the film. So after the altercation with this little boy, the little boy kind of comes over and pulls down Jay's swimming shorts.
Exposing his wiener.
And on this, in front of a whole poolside filled with people.
It's just sunbeds and folk just sunbathing. Yeah.
So apparently, oh gosh, what's it? Oh, his real name's Jay, isn't it?
His real name's James. Aye.
So he'd said a few times in interviews that he was going to do it, and they had also talked about how the creators of the show and the films were peer pressuring them all the time to kind of go further, do what they wanted them to do. And they're young, so they're probably maybe a little bit more keen to do those type of things. But he said he chickened out at the last minute, so of actually doing the full frontal.
Yeah.
But what we have here is not a prosthetic, friends. What we have here is an actual penis, but it's somebody else's.
Yeah.
So what they did, movie magic, James was wearing kind of these flesh-colored pants or underwear, a type of flesh-colored thong. And they had his stand-in, who was actually the son of one of the other actors who was in the film. And I guess they just asked him.
It's the woman on the tour bus who calls out Mackenzie when they're dropping them off from the airport.
Right. And so I guess they probably just asked around, like, who is willing to get naked on film? Well, it won't be your face or anything, but who's willing to lend their penis to James?
Yes.
So they had him stand in exactly the same spot, and I believe they actually trimmed his pubes into an arrow pointing down.
Right, okay, yeah.
Because James said that he just didn't feel like trimming his pubes in such a manner.
Yeah.
And trimmed his pubes into an arrow, pointing down at his penis, placed him in the spot, and then superimposed with digital magic penis.
Yeah, you would use a mask around the genital area on that person and then just superimpose it on top. Yeah, and then just make sure that obviously your mask was matched to the shorts coming down when you do the motion of the shot.
Yeah.
I think I heard something very similar. I listened to a podcast called Tell 'em Steve Dave, and they had Iain Morris and James Buckley on an episode that was referred to as, it was episode 123. It was called Briefcase Wankers, and they go into a little bit more detail into kind of how this came to be. And
do tell.
Well, what you're saying is that James Buckley wasn't brave enough to do it, but then I also heard that Iain and Damon and Ben thought it wasn't comically small enough to work for the moment. Yeah. So what they did was, but I mean, who's to say that this man was picked purely because his penis was small? But they did feel that the moment is funnier if Jay actually has quite a small member. So the way that they described it in the show, in the other podcast rather, was that they were basing it off the fact that this guy, not only was he more willing to obviously do the full frontal and have his junk on show, but it was more that he also had something that would work to be a little bit more comical because it was smaller than James's actual junk, according to their show, as far and as best as I can remember it.
It probably helps that they were in Majorca during the off season, so it was quite cold. So maybe that helped a bit with the comedy.
I'm not going to joke. I think they also said that in the podcast episode as well.
Yeah.
But certainly, yeah, I think
George
it works.
Costanza would say, I was in the pool.
Oh, Seinfeld. But I think I also think that I think for better or for worse, it also kind of solidifies a running joke with the Jay character from the show as well, is that his father's always referring to his small cock.
Right. And then, of course, in his mind, he is a
Lothario.
Sexual Lothario.
Yeah.
A sexual Tyrannosaurus who's out there finger banging and getting blowies every morning and never touched a boob in his life.
Of course.
So the second one I think is also incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
Comes in not long after, about 51 minutes in, where we get to meet Fernando.
Fernando, yeah.
At the club.
So the lads end up in a fight. They end up in an argument.
Classic.
So they end up splitting into two pairs. So Neil and Jay and Will and Simon are separated, and Neil and Jay end up going to this club with a bunch of dancers.
A bunch of lady dancers doing their thing up on the stage, and then the crowd roars for Fernando, who jumps on the stage. The ladies are gone, and Fernando does a dance.
Yeah.
And with a knife, cuts off his little pants that he was wearing from his costume.
His Tarzan shorts.
Little Tarzan shorts.
Yeah.
And proceeds to bend right over to where his anus is just shooting right into Jay and Neil's faces.
Yes.
Puckering up for them, as they say. As they say.
Because that's something that they say.
And Fernando's doing his dance, and he's totally naked. And yeah, I mean, it's buttholes, it's testicles.
Well, yeah, he's the self-filleting man.
He's doing the self-fillate.
Yeah.
On stage, right in front of these two young men, which, okay. I do really like how Fernando came to be in this film, because I guess one of the writers, I don't remember who it was.
I think they said it was Iain. Yeah, Iain? They always, like, Iain seems to be the one that they go for I guess, the writing inspiration.
The weird shit. So,
yeah.
I guess Iain was on holiday and saw Fernando in real life. I mean, that's Fernando, that's his name, that's his
That's
act.
the dude, yeah.
He's the self-fillet.
He's the self-sucking man, yeah.
And he wrote it into the script because he thought it would be funny. And they had, I guess, the producers track down Fernando and have him do his trick on camera. It's
something. It's genuinely something. But it perfectly characterizes the type of holiday that this is, really. Yeah. I mean, that sort of thing. Like the fucking wild benders that folk go on when they go to like Ibiza and fucking Malaga and all this sort of crap.
4 pints, 4 shots of Jaeger, and a fishbowl, please.
Oof. Yeah, fucking fishbowls. Fucking fishbowls.
So, I'm just going to jump in, if you don't mind, into the sequel, just because we'll talk about...
There are little hints of other kind of full frontal bit. I mean, Neil is we're going to talk about him in the sequel, but certainly Neil ends up we see like a prosthetic. There's a fakey dick in the first movie where he's only wearing his pants that got wet and they're like bright white, and you can see you can see like the outline of his dick, and also
that's
he has
right at the pool as well, so it's right in that same scene where Jay gets pantsed.
There's a bit where they've thrown the towels of this family. They'd reserved some sunbeds. It just so happens that they have monopoly over these sunbeds because they have a disabled daughter, and Neil's showing her Finding Nemo towel to her, and she's in tears, only to reveal at eye level perfectly with his crotch that his pants have gotten also wet, but it's just seeing the outline of his schlong right in front of her face as she starts screaming.
There's also like where he's wearing a towel at one point, the same character, and he's got a boner after having sex with this slightly older lady. Yes. And which was like apparently just a dildo that they'd kind of tucked under his towel for effect.
Movie magic.
Yeah, and then there's that other scene where Theo James and his pals coerce Simon into taking all of his clothes off and leaving him totally naked on the beach.
Yeah.
And he just covers up his junk with his hand. You don't see anything, but he did say that, that was just me naked on the beach.
Yeah, he just did it, yeah.
So...
Anyway, here we are to the INBETWEENERS sequel, the aptly called the INBETWEENERS 2.
INBETWEENERS 2, yeah. In the Outback.
Aye, it's a movie.
Well, they kind of go on a chase to find Jay's ex-girlfriend, who he met in the original film.
Yeah,
who has gone to Australia.
Yeah, I think certainly with that original movie is you have you have your four boys who then end up meeting, I guess, the close to female equivalent of their alters on this trip to Malaga. And obviously, all four of them hook up at the end. That's just kind of the way it goes.
Yep.
Obviously, with this sequel, everyone's kind of separated. They're all kind of currently in uni or they're in work, depending on who they are. But Jay has gone on a year out to go to, or it's his gap year, which is something I fucking hate. Hate the term gap year. It's fucking dumb as fuck. Basically, he's on a gap year in Australia, but effectively what we find out is that he's kind of pursuing Jane, who's his love interest from the last one. I guess the thing that kind of also you need to kind of point out as well is that there's a lot of there's a lot of sizist humor in reference to poor Jane, because she's a little bigger than the other girls as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's some horrible shit in the first movie where, she's made fun of because she's a bigger girl. She's gorgeous, too. And it just, I don't know. I don't like fat jokes, but I guess in the sequel, she's lost quite a bit of weight, and they are commenting on that as well.
Well, she works at a stud farm in the sequel, and she's out in the outback just dealing with studs all day.
You'll never get her back.
Down. Yeah, I think, like I say, I feel like the Inbetweeners existed in this lovely little kind of non-judgmental bubble. But certainly, if you look at it now, you are kind of just like, you're fascinated by how far they were able to take that show and the sort of things they were able to depict. I think it's great.
There's the section, and I want to talk about these wieners, but the wieners come in at the very end of the film, but they go to, what is it called? It's not called Splash Mountain. It's actually Wet and Wild that they're at in Australia, but whatever water park they go to.
Yeah, I can't really remember. We watched the movie, but I mean, it's
in and out.
It's in and out. I just don't think it's particularly. It's like Splash Fantasy or whatever. It's called Splash something or other. Splash Conquest.
Wet and Wild.
Yeah.
And Will is going to have a race down a slide with a rival to his love interest in the film. And so they're going to race down the slide.
Yeah, there's a real pack of like gap year wankers in this movie as well. Yeah. One of them just happens to be someone that Will met at fucking prep school.
Okay.
So she's a special case.
Okay. So they're going to race down this slide, and Neil is standing behind Will, and he's had problems doing shits this whole film. He's been pooping a lot, and he just talks about how they're real, and he explains exactly the kind of poops he's having, the width, the girth, and the density of all of his poo. And as they're about to go down the slide, Neil has a problem with the poo, and he's trying to get Will's attention, and in essence, Will goes down the slide, and then Neil accidentally drops, a turd falls out of his shorts and onto the slide behind Will. So now Will is in a race against this other man, and also in a race to beat the poo down the slide that's chasing him. And let me tell you, as someone who worked as a lifeguard at a water park, I have done slide races before, and I've won them. And you know how you do it is you have to go on your heels, and you have to lift up your back and ride on your shoulder blades and your heels, so you have the least amount of resistance on the slide, and you'll go faster. So you just gotta arch your back. That's how you win. Okay. Simon, or not his actual name is Simon, but Will would never have won that race. He won in the film. I'm just saying.
Well, the other guy,
he was trying to avoid the poo, and he was sitting up. Too much resistance on the slide. Never going to happen.
Yeah,
Dynamics are off.
Well, the other guy also had dreadlocks. He was a white English boy with dreadlocks, which is also another reason why fucking gap year.
When Will gets down the slide, he starts screaming about the poo, turns around, the poo shoots right into his face, and then there's vomit everywhere.
Laura likes a good, there's
That's
a
why
lot.
I like Jackass so much.
Yeah, I guess so. But the thing is, they treat it like it's a moment, like that moment with Willem Dafoe in Platoon. They kind of treat it like that, you know. There's a lot of kind of forced comedy stuff in that second movie that I kind of despise. I think the first 20 minutes of that film I absolutely fucking hate.
Is it the second the sequel where it's the opening looks like a Harry Potter film.
Yeah, it's awful.
I thought it was funny.
It's fucking horrific.
I thought it was really funny. And then they go to a party where people told him it was fancy dress, and so they dressed up like Harry Potter characters.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, like, yeah, I mean, they're basically just highlighting the fact that yeah, they're just, there's a lot of horrible bastards out there. Yeah, there's a lot of horrible pricks out there. And, I mean, to be honest, growing up in the UK, that is 100% true.
So, yeah, I mean, kids...
We can't move on to the next thing before I kind of said, there's that visual depiction of Jay's email, which I absolutely despise.
I thought that was funny, too.
It's one of the cringiest fucking things I've ever seen in my life.
Jay's pretty cringy, so...
I think it's like, it's best left to the imagination, as opposed to, like, showing it and doing all this. I fucking hated it.
Okay.
But, yeah. It's like the amount of time they must have spent just fucking, like, choreographing it, because it's all, like, Steadicam shots. It's awful.
Okay.
It's just not worth it at all.
Well, Simon Bird did say, and I don't know if we're blaming Damon and Iain for this, but this is their first foray into directing. And Simon Bird wasn't sure if this was the right project for them to jump into directing. He was a little bit nervous about it. And again, the only reason that Ben didn't do it was because he was doing Man Up at the time. Otherwise, he would have directed this.
There's a lot.
Maybe you can blame them for that opening.
Yeah, there's
sequence.
a lot of stylistic flourishes that I feel like don't need to be like in this second film. I feel like it's a little bit too much style that's kind of put in there. There's a lot of transitions and visual effects that I'm just like, what is this? Like, what is this nonsense, this tomfoolery?
Okay, let me jump into the first of two penis scenes in the sequel.
Yeah.
So when they basically run out of gas, right, to get to Jane's, which is where they were trying to get to Jay's love interest.
Yeah.
And ran out of gas, and they're in the desert, and it's, they're all going to die because they're dehydrated.
Of course.
And Neil says he has to pee. And for whatever reason, in order to survive, they think it would be a good idea to, like, pee in each other's mouths. And so Neil was going to pee in Simon's mouth. And you just see the tip of a penis. Now, I don't have any information on
if it was or wasn't.
If it was or wasn't, or whose, or if it was real, blah, blah, blah. I couldn't find any information on it, but it exists. And Neil pees in Simon's face, all over his face.
Yeah.
Real dark pee.
Oh, it's very, like...
it's very
like
thick.
Orangey brown thick. It's a weird kind of visual thing.
So close on their face as well.
It's so close, and you see that drop of urine like just splash onto Simon's tongue, and then obviously the real gag is that Neil did need to piss, so he just pisses all over Simon's face.
An hour, 19 minutes, and 20 seconds.
Yeah, we were getting slightly concerned. We didn't know if there was going to be a penis in this, but as far as we're aware, that's what that is. There is, prior to that, after they get kicked out of the party, the very beginning of the movie, they're in a pub, and Neil's dressed as Hermione Granger, and they're playing pool, and he's like leaning over the pool table, and the barman comes over and he's like, "You're barred." They're like, "Why?" And they went, "Look," and you can see he's kneeled over. He's wearing like a short skirt, and his nuts are just like hanging out below the bottom of the skirt. And obviously there's a dog at the pub, so the dog's licking at his nutsack.
Yeah, it's a classic comedy there.
Yes, very absurdist, very fun. But yeah, that's not even the last one. There's still another one to go.
Which is what I'd read about, is this one in particular.
This horrible post-credit sequence.
Yeah, so it's all, they decide, I don't know where, upper middle class these kids have to be.
Yeah, they have to be.
Go for a month, right, to Australia.
Oh, it's fucking insanity. It doesn't make any sense.
And then they're like, well, why don't we just keep traveling? Let's really hold on to this gap year idea. And so they go to Vietnam and they go to Thailand, and this is an hour 29 and 30. And, so they are in Thailand. The credits are already rolling, so this is where you would expect to see bloops. but it's just like a continuation of them on holiday.
Yeah.
They're in Thailand. They meet some ladies, and they're all around the table, and there's whoever's filming this.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because all the boys are sitting at the table with ladies, and the camera goes underneath the table and does essentially an upskirt around the table, and then you realize, and as soon as they said Thailand, and it's the In-Betweeners, you know that these are transgendered women or lady boys. There's a name for them, Kathoi, which I'm not pronouncing properly, but, you know, you've got lady boys. So in classic In-Betweeners fashion, all of these people have wieners as well.
The lowest hanging fruit.
Indeed.
Let's just say.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So that's that second penis scene.
Yeah. And that movie ends. Is there anything else we want to kind of add before we start wrapping up this this clunge fest?
Only two things. Wow. For the sequel, a doctor was only called to the set once when James Buckley thought he was having a heart attack, but it was actually just indigestion from eating chips and beer too quickly. And also,
oh man, that's
there
good.
is a particular actor who was meant to have a part in the sequel, but they ended up just kind of cutting that scene because they couldn't make her part make sense. And that actor was Daisy Ridley, from the Star Wars.
Oh,
because she was cast and was about to start doing The Force Awakens, so she couldn't do it anyway, so they just cut it out.
Holy shit.
Boom.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Did she make the right decision? We'll never really know.
Probably.
No, we're stuck with those films now. Oh, she's rich.
Yeah.
Of course.
She's for the money, baby.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Yeah, whatever. Fuck those fucking movies. The Star Wars ones, particularly. Those 3 Star Wars movies. There's
some good stuff in some of those Star Wars.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, whatever. You're all fucking. Yeah, no.
So I actually rated these films the same.
Oh, I thought can we not talk about Blake Harrison's dancing? Can we not just kind of bring that up?
Yes, absolutely.
He's a fucking legend. He just dances like it's fucking awesome. I wanted to get that out because I don't know if we'd ever feel like this episode was complete without talking about Blake's dancing. He's like
great.
He's like a classically trained actor. He studied modern dance for like 2 years, he said.
He's a very smart young man, and
that is the result.
Probably the best actor in this whole
I don't know if he's
franchise.
the best actor, but I'd say he might have, out of all the rest of them. They've all gone on to do separate things. I think James Buckley we've seen in more stuff, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
Like bit parts. He was in Pop Star. I remember seeing him in that, and then I saw him more notably in
another penis movie.
I can't remember what it's called, and I'm gonna find it out. But he was he played Del Boy in the prequel to Only Fools and Horses.
Who is this?
James Buckley.
Okay.
Yeah. So he has done things, and obviously, you know, Joe Thomas and stuff like that. But, you know, I think they're kind of still within the TV vein. But I do think Blake Harrison's probably potentially the most qualified out of all of them, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them all in different things since then. Actually, Blake Harrison less so. Obviously, you've seen Greg Davies in a bunch of stuff, but mostly in kind of just like British sitcoms. I know that Simon Bird was in that. Was it Friday Night Dinner?
Yeah,
that show's really funny.
Yeah, that show's really good. Like I say, I think they've kind of stuck to the same kind of comedy TV vein.
I feel as though Simon Bird will and probably has had a harder time than anyone else getting out of that kind of typecasting. You know, so good luck to him.
So that Only Fools and Horses prequel was called Rockin' Chips.
All right.
I'm surprised I did not know what that was called.
Rock and Chips or
Rockin' Chips? Yeah. Aye.
Okay.
Yeah. Weird one. But yeah.
You ready for the ratings?
I think so, yeah. I need to actually get them up because I can't fucking remember.
I'm going to start because I know what mine are and I wrote them down. I'm prepared, kind of. So I gave both of the films just an overall rating of a 3. I thought in my head that I was going to like the sequel less, which we actually watched first just for funsies the other day.
We'd never seen it before.
I saw it. I definitely had seen it, but again, it goes in and out just like a Fast and Furious sequel. So
yeah.
I gave them 3. I liked them both. For whatever reason, when we watched the In-Betweeners movie, after watching the sequel, I thought I was going to like it more, and I didn't. So I liked them both the same. They're both just fine, kind of better than, I don't know, whatever. It's a 3.
Yeah. So mine, I'm a little bit more sporadic. I gave the first one 3.5 because I still think it's funnier and I think it's a better film, and it's got a little bit more sentimentality to it. It's a little bit more nostalgic. I kind of feel like it's
to be the last one.
It was meant to be the last one, and it was meant to feel like this hopeful progression for the lads who were coming out of being children to being, I guess, like progressing towards being fully fledged adults.
Yeah.
And you know, they end up getting what they've always wanted, which was, you know, they wanted, I guess, like a sex, but like a partnership with some, like a female influence in their lives that was a positive one, because for the most part they'd all been dealing with relatively quite negative female influences in their lives from the women and stuff, the girls and stuff that they'd been seeing at school. So for the most part, this was kind of what it was. And then, obviously, the second movie comes, and it feels a little bit like an add-on, and it's a little bit superfluous, so I end up just kind of giving it 2.5. It's like straight down the middle, doesn't really need to exist, and it's not particularly funny for the most part.
Pretty good.
That bit itself also kind of sticks out a little bit like a sore thumb because of how stupid it is.
I'm a child, so
yeah. There's a lot of kind of bits in the second film that kind of stick out a wee bit, but it is what it is. Is what I said.
It's like I was saying the other day. If you go too deep into Instagram, you end up falling on a page called Fart Fans, and then that's just what happens.
That's basically your life for the
fart fans.
for the next 20 years is fart videos.
Still makes me laugh.
Yeah, a good fart is hard to come by.
So for visibility and rating, context, I gave them both a 3.5. I guess am I being lazy? I don't know. It's they're there. They're comedy penises, so they're in there for jokes. I don't know. I think boys are kind of like that. Boys are weird. They're always messing with their wieners. Like in this group, I assume everyone's. I mean, you see it in the show. Like everyone's seen everyone's penis, everyone's balls.
They all know what it looks like. Yeah,
right. And they talk about it constantly.
Yeah, that definitely ranks with what happens with groups of guys. Certain groups of guys. I'll not put myself out there. But certainly groups of guys where they're just like, oh yeah, let's look at my feet, look at my dick, and all this sort of stuff. So it does happen. And I have accidentally seen some of my friends' dicks when they've been drunk and things have happened and stuff like that.
I've seen most of my friends' boobs, so I guess you just get comfortable.
Yeah. This actually reminds me of one particular story of when we'd all gone on a night out and we all stayed over at a friend's and I'm sleeping on the sofa. And for whatever reason, we woke up in the morning and there's a bunch of wet clothes on the radiator that's on. And they start picking up. I was like, why are these clothes wet? And then what we found out later is my friend had he tried to go to the toilet. He'd accidentally wet himself. He'd then taken off all of his clothes and put them on the radiator to help them to dry them.
He didn't like rinse them. Just piss covered trousers.
Anyway, he then goes back to just lying on the sofa, which is a leather sofa, right next to where I was.
Ew.
And I woke up in the morning, obviously, and I'm like, why are you naked? And he fucking explained this whole situation to me. And then, other than the fact that obviously it wasn't our flat, that our flat, the flat person who was in the flat at the time was dealing with the piss situation. I think I was more appalled by the fact that he was just wandering around naked, like around us at any point. This is also the same guy that I remember once. He was changing in the room after, and I was playing a video game or something in the living room. And for whatever reason, there was just a flash because the door to the living room was open. There was just a flash of him coming out, and he wangled his dick about, and then he shot back out the doorway.
Wow. Wow.
Lads.
To be a young man. Yep.
Lads. Yeah. We were in our 20s. So,
men never change.
No, they don't. But certainly, I didn't do that.
You do it to me, and I think
remember.
it's funny.
Yeah, I don't know. If you've got a deck, you play with it.
I would.
Like, you honestly do. Yeah.
I would be arrested if I'd been born a man.
If it's not a couch button, you're playing with it because it wiggles around and stuff. Like, it's funny.
Penises are funny, and that's what this film is. Did you give your ratings?
I think I'm kind of in the same
context?
camp as you because contextually they're there for comedy value, and it's the levels of absurdity that they obviously reach that we're kind of focusing on here. So I think 3.5 is fine for what it is. But I like the idea that the show itself was relatively quite brave. It's quite daring. And also, again, some of the things they got away with, because there's a level of realism to some of the stuff that happens in the In-Betweeners that I'm just like, that definitely checks out for when I was younger.
Right.
Some of that stuff is like the things I heard, because I never partook in any of that stuff. I was a very quiet boy, thank fuck. But some of the things I heard of other people kind of partaking in things when we were young teenagers, it was fucking sickening. It genuinely was.
I think what we're trying to say is watch the show if you haven't. It's great. It's streaming on Prime.
Yeah, it's on Prime via Freevee.
The first film also is streaming on Prime. The sequel, this is as of a recording. I don't know where it is. You'll find it somewhere. You can rent it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's worth a rental. But,
if you're a fan, if you want
to complete the saga, effectively, they just take another one more dive into it, effectively.
Very classic, comforting television and classic, comforting, gross out cinema. Yeah, and it is what it is, and I'm fine with it. I like it.
Yeah. I think, it's a very well rounded, very well created, thought out show and movie set. I think it nails it on the head for me. So,
you got anything else?
Let me look through my notes.
I
don't know. The only other thing I've got in the top of here is I was going to talk about bus wankers, but that was about it, really.
Bus wankers.
Bus wankers, yeah.
Perfect.
If you don't have your own car, you're a bus wanker. So that's the thing. But no, I think I'm quite happy with what we've done.
Thank you. Good job. You're going to get a gold star.
Thank fuck for that.
Well, coming to you from Marco's nightclub, if you remember that was in the film.
Yeah, the fucking shithole.
Deep dive, baby.
Yeah, a deep dive. It's barely a deep dive.
With our chill, sexy vibe, I've been Laura.
I've been Ryan.
And, yeah. Bye. Goodbye.
Where's my mouse pointer? Right there. Oh.